What's going on, guys? It's the Cassius Morris Show. Thank you for tuning in for episode number 184. Tremendous guest on the podcast today. Singer, songwriter, bass guitar player. What doesn't this guy do? Dylan Cartlidge, incredible musical artist from the UK on the program today. You know, it wasn't rosy growing up for Dylan Cartlidge. This is something I actually didn't know. We talk about his upbringing in the UK. You know, personally, as somebody who's born and raised in Canada, I've spent time in the United States. I've spent time in the Caribbean. I've spent time in some places. I haven't spent time in the UK. And especially to find out what it's like in their rougher communities that would be comparable to, cities like, or areas like the rough parts of Chicago or the rough parts of Detroit. To hear what that's like in the UK was really fascinating to me. I really had no clue what it was like, and I also never thought of the UK in that light. I think Canadians, and I think that other countries experience this a lot with Canada too, is we have a rosy perception of that region. And I don't think it's accurate. I think that even a place like Paris, people forget that it's a big city and it's not just some place with a tower. It's so there's real life going on in all these places, and I think it's important to remember that because people, just like I said about Canada, people romanticize this place like everybody's nice. I wish everybody was nice. I run into 10 assholes every time I walk out my door, and I run into 10 nice people every time I walk out my door. It's just like anywhere else. So while every place is vastly different, there are things that I think never change. And you're definitely not going to find a place where everybody's great, but that's besides the point. Very interesting to hear the insight from Dylan Cartlidge. He has a new release, the single Yellow Brick Road. Fantastic single. And you guys know I'd never come up here and say it if I didn't believe it. He fuses so many different genres of music. There's rock, there's alternative, there's singer-songwriter vibes. There's just so much that he does, and I highly encourage everybody to go check it out. It should be on your favorite streaming service as well as YouTube. That's Dylan Cartlidge, and make sure to follow him on all his social media, which is going to be down in the description of this video or audio broadcast. Thanks to Dylan. Shout out Scott for arranging the interview. I love you, man. And without further ado, here's my exclusive interview with Dylan Cartlidge.
In summary, I'm a kooky British black guy with an afro. I make alternative hip hop music. My name's Dylan Cartlidge. I am a rapper first and foremost. I started out as a rapper. I actually exclusively only listen to rap, anything that remotely had a guitar in it or anything that sounded like it's had real amps or real guitars. I was like, no, that's for the metalheads. That's not for me. I don't like that. And then one day I joined a band, and these dudes with leather jackets and Chelsea boots kind of stole my life away and showed me the black keys and the white stripes, and I've never looked back since.
There you go.
I just I'm now one of those metalheads that I used to say that I'd never be.
And here he is, and now we're going to get everybody up to date, I guess, on the progress of that. Dylan Cartlidge, thank you so much for joining me on the Cassius Morris Show.
Thank you for having me. Like I say a little bit about my background and how I kind of got into doing this. I am currently writing my first album. I'm releasing an EP at the moment. The lead single from that EP is Yellow Brick Road. The latest single that's out, and that's been doing really well, man. I've been getting a lot of love on American radio and stuff, which has been fantastic, particularly in this crazy time right now. It's I'd love to be here in person, but here we are virtually, having an interview, which I guess is normal in the podcast space.
It's become normal now, definitely. Yeah. And it's, it's okay. It's something that we sort of adapt to. I want to go a little bit back with you before we catch up to everything current date, because of course there's a lot to talk about with the new single. Are you in London, UK right now?
Not London. I am in the UK though. A little more in. So London's like, pretty much real, like right in the south, right in the corner, and I'm kind of maybe 5-6 hours drive up in the north. I'm closer to Newcastle upon Tyne, up on Tyne, in a place called Middlesbrough.
Okay, so born and raised in the UK, I'll take it.
Yes, yeah, born and raised here, born in the Midlands. Now I live in the North.
Okay, so is there any major differences? Because as somebody from Canada, I've never been anywhere in the UK. Like, what would be the biggest difference from where you're at and London?
Oh yeah, hell yeah, man! The big difference is here. It's like I know there's like a lot of people in Canada and in the US have massive love for sports, and it's very much the same in England. Basically, whereabouts you're born in the country pretty much determines what football shirt you're gonna put on, and
Okay.
who you're willing to fight to the death for. In terms of your supporting your team, and so yeah, more in the South. Um, it is lots of big towns, lots of big cities, and then kind of in the Midlands where I'm from, it's a little bit more industry driven, kind of I know like an Akron, Ohio, or a
Hmm.
Detroit type kind of vibe. And then the further north you go, more towards Scotland, there's a lot more rural, a lot more yeah, valleys and countryside and towns as well. But yeah, it's kind of like gets a little bit more wild, a little bit more rural the further north you go, typically.
Interesting. So a little bit more blue collar, so to speak, in that region than maybe London.
100%.
Interesting. Well, yeah, just curious. That was sort of a little personal sidebar on that note. So growing up in the UK and where you were at, were you surrounded by music, or like was music a passion that you had to seek out for yourself? I'm curious.
A little bit of both. I grew up in a an environment where I was exposed to music. I grew up in a household like a '90s techno house DJ kind of
Mm.
setup, where my mother at the time was my mother was seeing somebody that was like a techno house DJ, and he had a massive stereo system in the house, and all sorts of tape decks lying around and stuff. So I remember picking up like random Britpop bands and trance tapes and all this kind of stuff when I was
Mm.
young. But then for me, really, I did had a kind of like an arm's length relationship with music. I found myself gravitating towards a lot of left field hip hop, like Kid Cudi and Stromae,
Okay.
Kanye West, just artists, really a kind of like backpack hip hop as it was back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And a pink
but
polo.
yeah, well, yeah, I just was a massive fan of hip hop and pop music, and then really, I had a little bit of a, turbulent childhood, and I began rapping in response to that, as the means to make sense of my experiences, and that's really then where it came from. It felt a little bit like I didn't have a choice. It wasn't
Mm.
it's something that I just necessarily decided I wanted to like or was into. It was definitely by circumstance, and then from then on, it's just been a natural part of my, emotional regulation and very much who I am. And I still write to make sense of my experiences today.
Wow. So you're drawing from real life, and you're sort of, I like how you say you're trying to make sense of things through music. That's interesting because I agree music is a really good way to explore those emotions. So you say you had a sort of turbulent upbringing. What sort of turbulence was there?
A lot of turbulence. The town I grew up in, the area I was from, in England, kind of like, the projects is kind of like council estates here. It's kind of like that kind of, state funded living.
Right.
Where all sorts kind of goes on. There's a lot of neglect in those childhoods. There's a lot of abuse, a lot of violence, and I grew up in and amongst that. And actually one of my first songs or whatever, it was one of those neighborhoods, so it was like it was a charming and wonderful place to the people that lived there, probably not to the people that were not from those areas.
Mm.
It also did have its drawbacks. There was remember examples of there was a kid I knew who was like a 13-year-old kid when I was young, and he one day decided to go to the local primary school, which is like kindergarten, and burnt it to the ground.
Wow.
This 13-year-old kid set this place on fire, and he watched it burn. And it was one of those places, a very cutthroat place where it's tough to grow up in, and I learned a lot of things, I experienced a lot of things, good and bad. But really, that's kind of where I'm from.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating. So a lot of crazy stuff going on, I guess, in the region. So just out of curiosity, in a region like that in the UK, is there a big weapons problem? Is it more sort of person to person stuff?
I would say more person to person stuff. I know, obviously, it's very different. The landscape replicate from here in the States. And I'm not sure about Canada specifically, but obviously the generalization is now that there's a lot more knife crime happening here, and maybe a lot more gun crime happening in the States. It's just a generalization. But back then, in the early 90s, I think that, I don't know, the culture at the time, it was a lot more, I don't know. There was definitely crime, and there was crimes committed with weapons, but I think there was a lot more of like honor among thieves, and the really just a good old beat down, really, and really
Right.
people proving themselves with their fists or whatever, and not the people that don't do that now. But yeah, definitely there wasn't too much of, specifically in the area that I was from. There wasn't too much, weapons and stuff involved, particularly among the young kids and the youth. It was more just, I guess more just heavy-handed, damaged kids
Yeah.
and neglectful parents, really.
No, that totally makes sense. And, it starts with the parents, it passes down to the kids, and then they become parents and etc. So what made you sort of try to divert from that? Because it doesn't sound like you overly enjoyed that surrounding, or am I wrong?
No, yeah, it was really tough. It was really tough. I had a younger brother who, I essentially, raised as, I was essentially his father. I tried to, get him into school and stuff. And for me, it reached a point to where, I had a decision to make. It was either, do I want to accept these experiences? Do I want to try and make something positive, or, do I look to give up? Do I give up on this situation? Do I give up on myself? Do I give up on life, essentially? And I came to those crossroads of contemplating suicide, contemplating self-harm, crime, all these different things. There was like many of the children raised in those areas that I was from, it's always it's not necessarily always a choice. Some kids definitely have less of a choice than others, but there was a massive emphasis on the general outlook from every person from the area, I guess, from the outside looking in terms
Yeah.
of prospects and kids, where you do extremely well to not be on drugs or in prison, or worse. And so for me, it was coming to that crossroad and really deciding that you know I was absolutely dumbfounded and profoundly touched. It was actually Kid Cudi's music that saved my life. And actually, sometimes when things were really bad and I didn't have any friends, I didn't have anybody to talk to. I was just in this situation that actually Kid Cudi's music spoke to me in a way that nothing else had. It was, rap songs that weren't necessarily just about going to the club or how good everything is on the other side. It
Yeah.
was really a rapper dealing with his demons, dealing with depression, dealing with isolation, and it actually made me feel like my situation wasn't the only situation in the world, and that other people do go through hardships and do go through troubles, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I took that just that profound feeling of knowing that music can be so much more than just an MP3 or and can mean something to people and really change people's lives, made me really think that I have an opportunity here, that if I was lucky enough and if I worked hard enough, that I could cling on to this backpack of insight, hopefully, and fight tooth and nail to keep it as pure as possible and as true to why I started doing it in the first place, and try to make that into a body of work that touched people maybe in the way that, or gave people the opportunity, if they ever needed it, to take something from it, like I took something from Kid Cudi's music.
Man, that's intense. So you listen to the Kid Cudi, and was it right at that point that you say, I want to make an album or I want to make a project, or were you just like, let me try to rap?
At that point, it was just rapping. I think that because there's a common thing in the UK that, like, a lot of UK rappers necessarily, the UK hip hop scene is really interesting because it's kind of like there isn't that many people that do hip hop in the UK. There is a UK hip hop scene, but for the
Hmm.
most part, people like not wanting to sound American or not wanting to sound like anywhere else and
Right.
actually doing something different. But for me, I was in that category whereby I wasn't trying to sound American, or I wasn't trying to sound like your traditional boom bap hip hop. and I wasn't trying to do something new and just do something strictly British and in terms of the grime scene or the dance hall or anything like that. It was me. I was coming out from a hip hop angle, coming out from an American style, but in my English accent. And so that is kind of a rare breed over here. I mean, it's definitely more popular than it was now, but it's hard. It's hard to find. And so for me, I was rapping and I was hearing this music, take it in, and from that point onwards, it was not necessarily that this is going to be a body of work or that this is going to be a song or that I'm just going to straight rapping, but it was a personal epiphany that these experiences and this feeling and this turning point was like the fact that I'm trying to turn the situation on its head has to be worth something. I feel like there has to be somebody, whether it's now or in the future, that's going to be in a similar position at a similar crossroads. And I took this on myself and my own responsibility to feel like if I had somebody like Kid Cudi was, or if I had somebody to help me make sense of these situations in any way, shape, or form whatsoever, then maybe that could lessen the likelihood that maybe somebody didn't hear Kid Cudi's music, or maybe somebody didn't get that last sort of talking to, or get the option to know that there's something else out there for them. And that really made me feel terribly sad, to be honest, because I felt like there were so many kids in my area and I knew that just never stood a chance, not because they didn't physically have chances, but just because the kind of like the outlook and everything they see around them seems like the entire world, and it's so hard to see anything else. And so I really felt like for me it was a personal responsibility to try and make sense of my situation, so that every single step I take forward, this becomes more possible for people from similar backgrounds, or people who just overcome adversity.
That's a really good purpose. There's a good friend of mine, and he's sort of a coach to people, and he always tells me it's great to start with your why. It's like, just know why you're doing something, and it should be easy to explain. But farther than that, I think it's important to have a good why, and that's a really good why. Like, you're trying to inspire people, you're trying to help pull yourself out of a bad situation. So I really like that. So at what point, like, how long does it take? Maybe a year, 6 months to make a project, or was it sooner?
It took a long time, man. Like I say, it was a personal thing. I really decided at that point that music was going to be part of my emotional regulation. And it took me blimmin' hell. I think that maybe to get to the position that I'm in now, where I'm in a position to make a record. I'm doing it full time. I've got the support of some different companies to do it full time. It really, man, it took me like 10, 11 years.
Wow.
And in that whole time, it came out in many different forms, man. It was interesting. I like I said, I joined a band when I was 16. I was part of like a really rowdy. This is the point to where like before I talked a lot about my experiences and came to terms with things. I was probably about 21, and I was about between the ages of 16 and 19. Like a lot of young males are, it's just really angsty, or a lot of young people in general are really angsty. And I joined this band. It was like we were relatively successful as a DIY band in the UK. It was like a heavy, like a Rage Against the Machine type of rap rock band. It's kind of like
That's awesome.
Zach De La Rocha fronted Black Keys. And every single gig I was screaming. I had no idea how to sing. I was just screaming for mental, ripping my shirts. It was just like a total vibe, man. But that was really me, experimenting and expressing myself. And we were all just young and expressing ourselves, and that really was the curbstone and the cornerstone of trying to learn everything that I'm doing now. Going out to gigs, driving around, with your friends around the country, doing everything yourself, being your own merch person, being your own promo, being your own manager. It was just like gave me the foundations to do everything that I'm doing now. And from there, I after the well, it's kind of funny actually, because when I was in that band, it was probably a good thing, to be honest, because we had a little bit of taste of success. We were in this competition to play like a big festival in the UK, and we had a really, a dedicated fan base. And I remember it went to my head so much that I began to, I felt like I'd already planned what I was going to say on the Jules Holland show.
Oh, big program.
Yeah. I'd already planned what skill moves I was gonna do at the charity event. Celebrities. It was just like I'd done a whole thing, like a whole childish fantasy in my head, right? And so then when the band broke up, it just like was crazy because I went from like doing that and planning all this success to working in a call center, man, like the most
Man.
like 9 to 5, really rough and ready, really, almost like pyramid schemish kind of, hard living,
Yeah.
and that was a lot of adjustment. And at that point, it's where I started my solo career. It was like, well, I was a rapper before, I was a rapper after. Thank God that happened because, I'd like to think I'm a little bit more mature and modest now, and I feel like ready for, the opportunity to pursue a project like this. And here it is, and here I am.
Man, that's so, that's really incredible. And also it makes perfect sense where the other genres come in, because listening to your music, and this is one thing I really like. It's never like, oh, this is a rapper, or this is like a funk guy, or this is this or that. It's just you very uniquely, but it sounds like many different genres. Does that like ever become challenging for you to sort of maintain all the different types of sounds?
Definitely, it is a challenge, but not in the way that I guess I imagined that I thought it would be, or that maybe other people may think it would be. So it's one of those things, like I said, that music has just for the longest time been part of my natural, emotional regulation, to the point to where like when I write a song, it's usually like it starts out as like well, not even a thought. Like usually every song for me is like a really overwhelming feeling of a build up of pressure, just like subconscious bubbling of all the things that I've been taking in, and things that I've been stewing on in my personal life, in my professional life, in society. And then usually I go into a studio and I just almost like regurgitate this big subconscious gloop of whatever,
Yeah.
just pick up jibber jabber, just blah blah blah, whatever it is, and then take a look at it and be like, whoa, what's this, and let's kind of form it into a song. And I find that when I do that, I know that not when I do that, I know it's right, but I know I'm always making the next song I make is always a right song when I can, when it comes from a place of emotional regulation, which isn't the same for everybody because everybody experiences art differently. But for
Yeah.
me, like, that's my vibe, and I know that I'm staying true to my vibe, and working myself and get the best out of myself when that happens. And when I listen to that, when that subconscious gloop and God knows what it is gets turned into a bit of a structure or a demo, if I hear that and I'm like, whoa, there's a little bit of Ray Charles there, or that sounds a little
Hmm.
bit like Talking Heads, or there's a Black Keys thing there, or that's a Jack White or a Muse thing, or whatever it is. Like I know it's the right track when I'm surprised when I hear the reference, when I can't imagine what the reference sounds like, or that I'd ever make a song that sounded like those references. That's when I know it's the exact right thing.
Hmm.
I feel like the second that I try to preempt or control where my influences and references come from, is the second that I start to not sound like the thing that you just described.
Yeah, it sort of loses that unique quality, I guess, when you overthink it, and that makes a lot of sense because I sort of hear you saying like you don't know exactly what it is at a given moment that inspires you. So, like if somebody was to ask you, was it the bus ride or was it the car ride or whatever? But it's just like a subconscious thing of it's like a collection of everything. Is that what you're saying?
Definitely, I feel like it's one of those things, when in your life, whatever, you can be doing stuff on the daily, you can be having a great time, you can be having a bad time, whatever it is. I feel like when you come to those moments in your life when you have that epiphany where like one day either you sit down with your partner or your mom or whoever it is, or even just yourself, and you're like, oh my god, for the longest time like this has been happening and it's been cool or it's not been cool, but
Hmm.
now I'm in a place where I've just had a realization and little bit of self growth into terms of like what that meant to me, or like I understand what that means now, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. I feel like those moments for me are music, and the way that I understand myself and kind of like my my surroundings is by having those epiphanies. So I don't sit down and come to that realization, or I do come to that realization with my family and friends, but I actually do it with my music first, and I will understand it until it's an audible thing, and I'm like, oh my god, that's why I've been feeling that way. This song is exactly why I've been feeling that way. And so for me, like I said, I don't know where the inspiration comes from, but it's very very much driven from an emotional place, I guess is what I'm trying to say in a really long-winded way.
No, that's fascinating stuff. I mean, I'm all about like the construction of music and how it's built. So I'm always fascinated with stuff like that. Speaking of building something, Yellow Brick Road. Talk to me about the single. Talk to me about, I guess, the title and the concept, but mostly the music video. I was really wowed by the music video, and if anybody hasn't seen it, there's a link in the description.
So yeah, let's start with I guess where the song came from. So this song was the very first song that I ever wrote in a music studio, like in a big fancy music studio.
Wow.
And I was working with this guy at the time who's now a friend of mine called James Dring, who's a fantastic producer, a good friend of mine, who he's worked on as a British artist called Jamie T. He's done like 4 of his 5 albums, I believe, and he also produced a lot of stuff on Demon Days by Gorillaz.
Okay.
And so like that kind of resume and that kind of thing for me, at the time when it was happening, I was still working in a bar. Like I was working in a bar, I was pulling pints for people, and at the same time, after that I was running off to London and trying to make this dream work. And so I was on this absolute tipping point of like one foot in one world and one foot in the other. It's like on 1 minute I'm pouring pints to the old bloke that's telling me about his boats and his card games that he's lost in his life, and on the other hand I've got this mega world famous producer saying let's make music together. And so it was a crazy thing, and I felt so conflicted and split. And so I just came to the decision that I was going to go into the studio session. I'm not trying to write. I'm not trying to go in there with anything specific. I'm not trying to come in feeling like I've already written the best song ever. In my approach to every song, and it's the same because it's fueled by my experiences, I go in there with a blank slate. And this is really where my rapping background comes in great, because I'm a rapper by trade, so improvisation is my thing. I can freestyle, and I've just learned to I'm just an improvisational person for the most part. And I go in there with nothing, and just with the mindset of like I don't care what happens, if I can go into this experience and come out with it, encapsulating how this moment feels and how walking into this great unknown, this giant sort of musical industry, magic curtain in the opposite end of the country, if I can go into this room and encapsulate how this whole experience feels, that's a win. It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter where it leads, where it doesn't lead. That's the only object of this, is to encapsulate this experience. And that's what I tried to do.
To not make it like an overly, because again, if you psych yourself out, I feel like that is one of the biggest killers of creativity, and spontaneity.
100%. Like I say, for me, I really do feel a vibe in a room and a vibe at the time. And I feel like if you try and construct too much before you go in, you can somehow restrict the creativity or the flow of of what's happening on the day or how you feeling on the day. Like if you go in writing a song, this the saddest song in your life, and you turn up and you're as happy as Larry, you come into a distinct disingenuousness there, where you have tried to preempt how you're going to feel on that day and what you're going to write. And for me, it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, because I that's the thing. Like I've even had it experimenting with music on the side, where like I'll write a song in a certain energy, and maybe I'll say I'll record it next week or something, and I go to try it out, and it's like I don't feel that way anymore. I even heard Corey Taylor from Slipknot say something about how he's not crazy about doing some of the older songs because he's like, I'm not an angry 20-year-old anymore. So yeah, it's makes sense.
It's the most profound thing, man. In a lot of art in general, like you say, Corey Taylor. There's so many, just so many examples of it's not even just music, but like films. If you look at like like somebody like Rob Zombie, you can like clearly see that Rob Zombie's music and Rob Zombie's horror films are kind of hand in hand, and they're all
Yeah,
just
they're like that, definitely.
exactly. And I kind of feel like, yeah, like you say, people change, and I feel like, you know, for me at least, art and songs encapsulate feelings, and feelings change over time.
Yes, 100%. Dylan, this has been a really, really great conversation. I appreciate you for dropping some insight for me. What's next for you, and where can the people find you? What are you looking to show them? I know you have a Spotify playlist.
Yeah, I have a Spotify playlist. It's called Dill's Picks. You can find that on my artist profile, which is Dylan Cartlidge on Spotify. That's Cartlidge is in like sort of knee cartilage or something. I have obviously got Instagram, Twitter, SoundCloud, Facebook, all that stuff. It's just Dylan Cartlidge music. You can find me at all those things. And Cassius, is, you know, it's been an absolute pleasure. What's next for me is Yellow Brick Road is going to hopefully continue doing its thing. And then I'm going to release the next two songs off the EP that Yellow Brick Road is from, which are Cheerleader and Summertime, over the course of the summer, of course, summertime.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then, yeah, and then later on the year, we could be looking at a record.
Awesome. Well, I'm really very much looking forward to it. You know, I'll be listening, and I encourage everybody else to do the same. Dylan, thank you so much.
That would be amazing. And if you don't mind, Cassius, if you'd like, before you go, yeah, I guess I would like. It's not an exact science, and it always feels a little bit like jumping into the Grand Canyon when it happens. But I would like to do a freestyle for you, if that's all right.
Hey, listen, see, I never want to be the guy to put somebody on the spot, but would love to have you freestyle. Let's go. Dylan Cartlidge live on the Cassius Morris Show, exclusive performance.
Okay, so like I say, this is just totally off the top of my head. Let's see what happens. It could go right, could go wrong, who knows. Okay. If you love music, I guess you should pursue it. Like Cassius said, you should just do it. Even if he's doing like he's doing like a free ad, and you can do this like he's looking at Joey Diaz in the background, like he's doing this for the pie. American right there is looking Family Guys on the wall. Yes, even does it like it's bliss, like Gene Simmons was saying, annoying like Kiss. If he wants to do this off the top of his brain, let's hope we can shake Joe Rogan's hand again, like in the YouTube videos in the frame. Even if he does it, yeah, you know the name, it's still in Cartlidge. Even if he does it like a new way. Cassius went to Barbados for 17 days and did a vlog, and he put it up on YouTube. I've just seen that before I watched it because he's new, dude. And so I'm out here, he's doing it like Canada made Nickelback, but I ain't really mad at you because this is photographs like a graph, and your brother likes to do it. Yeah, you know, you saw Zach Wild doing the experience and kicking it. Zach Sabbath, even if he's got it, you know it's your boy Dill now. I'll just kick it with a freestyle quick because I try and keep it smooth and I try and keep it slick. Peace.
Hey, my man. I got to give a round of applause right here for that one, dude. Off the top of the dome. I appreciate it. Spicing up the show today. That was fire.
Thank you very much, brother. Thank you for your time. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
And there you have it. My podcast with Dylan Cartlidge, all the way from the UK. I want to thank Dylan for coming on the podcast. I want to remind everybody to check out the single Yellow Brick Road. Really, really killer song, folks. I cannot stress this enough. Check it out. The link in the bio in this audio/video broadcast, wherever you're tuning in. And wherever you're tuned in, please make sure to subscribe, be it YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio. We're everywhere. And leave a review if you can, or a comment on YouTube. It definitely helps everything in every possible sense for this program. Of course, make sure to follow our guest. You can follow me on Twitter at Cassius Morris, Facebook.com/Cassius Show. I'm going to start doing the live broadcasts on the official Facebook page because that's what I should have been doing anyway. And follow me on Instagram at Cassius Morris _. That's probably where I'm the most active. But you can catch me active on all those pages. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, this is Cassius Morris saying, rock on.